has sort of a rural setting where they were brought up, and that's in Masvingo. But I'm here, I'm a junior this year, and I'm an MIS marketing major. And well, we're just going to have fun. And this isn't going to be a lecture about Zimbabwe, it's just going to be some experience about Zimbabwe, and probably you'll feel me when I start talking, and you'll want to come to Zimbabwe. And that's the hope that's the wish I would love everyone to, to come home with me and experience the beauty and the hospitality we have. I welcome you all, and I thank you very much for being here. And to start off, I will just talk in brief about Zimbabwe. And well, I'll obviously welcome you. It's a hospitality country, and we always smile. And the genuine part about us is that we do have the Minnesota, is it kind or nice? Yeah, but we have it in a more deep, way. We actually are nice. We actually are genuinely opposed to wherever we talk to and wherever we go. And you might notice that whenever I walk around campus, I stop and I don't just say hi. After my hi, I say how are you? And that's part of the culture, the Shona culture that we have. We are not allowed to just go away without saying how are you? And that's the Eastern Highlands. And I'm sorry I cannot go there and pinpoint where the places are, but bear with me. As you can see, Harare being right on top. Fortunately, I have to put it right there. It's right there, right there. That's the capital city, and in Harare we have 2 million people that stay in a sort of compressed area of 24,000 square. Yeah, 24,000. And the capital city, that's where you get the national government is there, and the city is beautiful, but it's being polluted by too much, car emission, smoke emission and everything. But we have a beautiful city as well as a beautiful scenery, like the cottage, and I would have the ladies attest to it. And that's our capital city, and that's Harare. We have the second capital city, which is in Matabeleland, and that's a province which was I'll get there in a minute, but it was actually occupied by the Zulu immigrants from South Africa. And the Matabeleland means the land of the Ndebele people. And that's where the second capital city is. And we have actually quite some exciting features in Matabeleland, one of which is the, I hope it will be, because Bulawayo is right here, and right here in Plumtree, we have a very unique feature which I am not willing to say, but it's an embarrassment to the country as a whole, but it's unique in its own sense because of the economic, social, and political situations that are going on. We have a lot of young kids that go here because it's close to the border between Botswana and also leeway to South Africa. And because of that, we have a social disorientation there. And it's well known in most European countries, the situation. So, but that's a unique place to go if you want to see the economic adversities that are that have come about because of the economic structural adjustment program. And Zimbabwe, the geography, as I think it's not exactly Southern Africa. it's Central Africa, that is politically speaking. But geographically speaking, they say we are Southern Africans, but South Africa is really south of Africa, and I wouldn't dispute that. And the coordinates, it's 20, 2000 south and 2000 east, whatever that means. But just for informational sake, that's the coordinates that we are located in. And the total area that's the land is 300. No, it's actually the total area that's occupied by Zimbabwe, that small teapot country, is 390,580 square kilometers. And the land itself is 386,670. With that, I would say, unfortunately, 3/4 of that is semi-arid. And then a quarter of it is turning into a desert. So we basically have good soil of probably half of that, that amount of land. And the water is 3,910. Hey, why am I saying this? You don't need to know that. But the comparative area, if I may put you closer to the United States, the size of Zimbabwe is as close to that of Montana. If you know Montana, that's how big it is. And I'm sure you can relate to that. And Zimbabwe, formerly known as Rhodesia. Now this is the worst part I wouldn't like to talk about, because it gives me a lot of emotions. Zimbabwe, formerly known as Rhodesia, that name has made a lot of hassles and pain for Zimbabweans, the native Zimbabweans. And it was annexed by Cecil John Rhodes and his company under the British control. That was in 1890. That's when he wisely or cunningly tricked the Ndebele king, who was ruler over the Zimbabwean, or the lands that were close to the Matabeleland. So it affected the Mashonaland, the Midlands, and also the Manicaland area. And he is the one with his signature, which was an X, got Zimbabwe into being chartered under the British colonial rule. And I would say that from what I know and from what I have been told by my great-grandparents and grandparents, is that when Cecil John Rhodes came into Zimbabwe, it was a peaceful country. We were at war between tribes. That's understandable. That was the evolution of things and the time, because of population expansion and other conquests for land and for survival. But when he came, he accelerated the whole process. But that's a good thing. But on the other hand, he left nothing for the native people of Zimbabwe. We were given a quarter of the land that was arable, and 90% of the land that we occupy, even up to today, is soil, sand, and it's not farmable, if that's the right word. You cannot farm on it. And this occupation has led to a lot of disputes, as expected. And I'll go on to the political and economic and social effects that came up about because of this. Socially, it was a divide and conquer rule. And the idea of dividing tribes, like we have the Karanga, I am a Zulu, they are Manikas, they are the Yambes, and they are the Ndaus, and we all speak close to the same dialect. Only we do have the R, some don't have the R, they have the L, and something like that. But because of those small differences, the British came in and managed to divide us. And when they did that, alas, we started hating each other. We had wars basically amongst each other. We couldn't see each other face to face. Socially, up to today, the tribes that were involved then, the Karanga, the Zulu, the Tori, the Ndaus, and the Ndebele people, we don't see eye to eye. And that's an unfortunate case. It wasn't because we couldn't handle it ourselves, but if it wasn't for this colonization, we would have been able to have gone through the process in a timely manner and, you know, gradually get together. But unfortunately, it wasn't so. And because of that, we had rebellions in 1896, but actually they started in 1893, and it spread out amongst the Shona people that didn't want to work for other people, because the Shona, the largest group of people that inhabit the Zimbabwean land, actually they are hard workers. We work hard, we work the land because we know how to work it. And we didn't have anyone come above us to work the land and make us work the land, so we disputed and rebelled against them. And it spread out into the Matebeleland, Manicaland areas by 1896. But because we were not united, because we didn't get our efforts all together, what happened was they thwarted us bit by bit, tribe by tribe, actually eliminating about 3 tribes. And up to today, we have 19 major languages. We were supposed to have 23, and then 2 of them were eliminated, and we don't have one living language, but a second language. So 2 to 3, I do believe, were actually eliminated completely because they were a hassle. And that's the atrocity that I haven't yet seen in one of the history books that has been written yet. So history as it is not the same as we know ourselves from home. And the Second Chimurenga War, or Chimurenga means the War of Liberation, and the Second Chimurenga War was fought between 1963 to 1979, or technically to 1980. And this war, we had at least educated ourselves. We were striving hard to get together as tribes and fight off the colonial rule. And it wasn't because we wanted to, but because we saw, you know, Ghana, we saw Nigeria, we saw Botswana, we saw Namibia in 1975. Mozambique was, you know, emancipated, and all the other countries around us were gaining their independence because they had fought a war or they were doing something about it. So it wasn't because we were holding hands in mutual agreement, but because of the factors surrounding us, that is the border countries, that we came together and fought against the Zimbabwean white people. I am sorry to say white people, but do bear with me. It's sometimes tough to talk about this because I lost half my family in this war, and in the first war, I lost the whole clan. My grandfather was a king who was migrating from South Africa into Zimbabwe, and along his journeys, he actually had all his people, except for a couple of them, killed, just because he was, I don't know, maybe he was a little bit tough, resistance and stuff like. He got his tribe killed, and up till today, they say it's a curse in the Kwangware clan that you got people killed because you were tough. But it's a curse we will, or it's a background and history we will always, you know, carry on our shoulders, and it's tough to many of us who, when the ceremonies are being held, we do have a tough time going through them. So that's about the history of Zimbabwe. But there is more to come, but I'll just move through to to the what's this? To the land boundaries. Yeah, those ones are cute. They are actually interesting, because if I may tell you, I've got cousins in all of those countries that you'll see. South Africa, Namibia is there, but we are not really closely bordered with them, but we've got a strip that comes close to us. We've got Botswana, Zambia, Malawi is not close to us, but Mozambique too. All those countries, I have cousins in those countries. But because of the borderline, the thing the colonial era brought to us, the idea of dividing families, the idea of keeping people away from each other just because they wanted to take a piece of the good fruit of Africa, which is still there, but not in its full glory. The amazing part about all these countries that border us is that on each border there is a family that lives on one end to the other. And when I say that, it's like I've got family in Mozambique, I can talk to them in my language, but we are not allowed to cross over the border at all unless you have official proof. And I don't know if you see it's fair to go and visit your relatives after a long trail of paperwork just to say hi to them. But that's the fact. We have a problem with that. All those countries are related to us, and as much as it is, we are a family, we are one. And Zimbabwe, because of those borders, we don't have any water or, kind of a beach, so to speak. So when I came here, I straight away went to Florida and experienced the nice ocean. But unfortunately, we do not have an ocean or anything like that. But the good part about being a landlocked country is that we are in the center of many major export rails and trails. So it contributes to us economically, but as usual, and still up to today, we don't own anything as African people, as native Zimbabweans, the Shonas and the Veles and other ethnic groups. We only are politically empowered, but economically we don't own anything at all. Well, you can argue with me and say, but you have shops here, you got businesses, small businesses, but the truth is this: the businesses we own count for less than 2% of the whole pie of the economy. And because of that, we still are indirectly being ruled by the white people. Not bad, it's not bad. It's actually a way of saying, I hate to say this, it's the ones that have the most power gain the most. But it's killing us all. It's actually killing. Excuse me. Each day, every minute, people are dying, not because they cannot do something, they cannot work the land. They have all that. But because of the economic power that's there, and we are not empowered economically, people are starving. Thousands of children are dying as it is. But we are known in Africa as the breadbasket of Southern Africa. But where does all that go to? It goes out. It doesn't stay in Zimbabwe, it goes out. And that's too hard because I've got cousins, I've got family, I've got friends that I have seen die of hunger when we have a surplus, as they reported in the newspapers. But they died. It's too tough. But the population, I should say, is not that, because I know we are more than 15 million. But because of the epidemic that is that has taken over and overwhelmed Zimbabwe, and most of us know the World Health Organization would say and insist on saying that Zimbabwe has the highest AIDS rate. So that's an indication of how many people are dying. Because in 1997, when we had our census, population census, we had 15 million people that were recorded. And it was a dispute because the number of people that are dying because of AIDS and the number of people that are still alive, there is no correlation in it. So we will just use the estimations from the July 98 estimations, and it's 11,044,147 people. But I might say the epidemic itself is not caused by promiscuity. I do believe I remember telling you earlier that in Plumtree region, close to Bulawayo, the gateway to South Africa and Botswana, there are many young people going there, immigrating there. The reason is, as I had said, an embarrassing situation. It's because of the economic hardship that people are running away from the rural areas. They are running away from the urban areas too because of unemployment, right down to Plumtree, because they know that that's where the money is. So they're going to prostitution. They're going to many things, jump borders and get themselves killed. And it's an economic factor. Politically, we do understand that we are going through a process of democracy with a little bit of socialist ideas, but that's not a big problem. It's because of the economic situation that people have gone to all the lengths to get money. And I'll give you one serious situation. We had a drought in 1992. And in that drought, guess what? Families in the rural areas would have their daughters, 6 years, 18 years, 6 to 17. They will say, okay, this is my daughter. Please give me just a bucket of maize and you'll have her. So it was like, during that drought, people will trade human beings. And unfortunately, in this case, it was girls, for food. And I am sure that's one reason why we do have an underestimation of our population. And also, the ethnic groups in Africa, in my country, we are 98%, we constitute 98%, that is the ethnic groups. And the major ones are the Ndebele, the Shona being the largest, Ndebele being the second largest, the Kalanga, the Zulus, the Ndau, and so forth and so forth. There are smaller groups within the larger groups too because of the dialect, the way you speak, the way you click your tongue is also a major difference. And there are 20 languages in Zimbabwe, of which 19 are living languages. And living, I mean, when we say living, when I say something in my language, It's not just a symbol of syllable, it's a symbol of life. I speak, it's life. I say, how are you? I need to know that you are fine. If you are not fine, I inquire further. What can I do to help you? That's the living language that we have in Zimbabwe. That's why they might call them living languages. Well, but that's the way I see it. We actually have life in the words we speak. We don't just say something just for the sake of saying it. And political, well, we are a parliamentary democratic country, a republic, so to speak, the Republic of Zimbabwe, they call it. And our president, Comrade Gabriel, or Robert Gabriel Mugabe, has been in office for more than 15 years. He's gone, this is his 19th, I think. Excluding his first 3 years as Prime Minister, he's been in power for 15 years. And this young man, at the age of 80 years this year, 81, yeah, he still rules with a strong iron-clad fist. And here's the reason why we are not well developed. I would say this openly because I'm not afraid of him. He's my friend anyway. I've talked to him a couple of times. But the thing is, the young man has had socialist ideas. And you know, the relationship between the Western world and communist states is very, you know, there's some cold air there, there's some tension, so to speak. So Zimbabwe in 1980, the exchange rate was one Zimbabwean dollar was to $1 US. But we had a stronger, you know, currency than the US dollar and the British pound too. I mean, we were really strong. That was then. But when he came to power, because of his socialist ideas, all the people, the white people that had businesses in Zimbabwe, relocated their businesses to South Africa and Botswana. And that's the reason why South Africa and Botswana, you know, are stronger than us in currency-wise and also in economic performances. And I would say he put us in a dilemma because he wouldn't listen to his people. We didn't want socialist ideas. We didn't want the idea of, you know, me drive a car, leave it there, somebody comes and just picks it and drive it away, as much as you would purport. We wanted a fair, you know, fair distribution of the wealth, but in terms of a person's talent and skills. That's what we wanted. And he led us into a communist state, so to speak, and we were sort of not in good books with USA. And if you're not in good books with USA, you know, as the story goes, you are definitely losing. So we have administrative divisions, which are 8 provinces. We have the Manica land, Matebela land, Mashona land, that's east, central, east, west, and south, and then Matebela land. Yeah, that should count to 8. I forgot to count. But those 8 provinces, there are only 2 major cities like Zimbabwe, Harare, or and Bulawayo, but we don't consider Bulawayo as a major city, but a second capital city. And the Constitution, enacted in 1979, this one hasn't been changed at all, or it hasn't been amended at all. And guess what? We fought a war to topple down the constitutional rule of the British people, right? And understandably, the same people that enacted that law had British people helped them. And the British settlers who actually sponsored the whole thing at the Lancaster conference had it made in such a way that it protects the British people. So, we still uphold this system, the Constitution, and I mean, making sense out of this, we fought a war to bring that down, but we still are upheld by such a constitution, which I personally think is such an absurd thing. It's really, 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 really bad for us. But they say, who cares, as long as the president is having the money go to the Swiss bank and he's feeding his family. That's all they care for. But the legal system, which is a mixture of Roman Dutch law with common English law, has helped us much to say than the Constitution itself, because recently the High Court, the Justice or the High Court they call it, has overruled the president's inaction to change a part of a law which would entitle women to go further into, into being considered men's property. So the legal system works perfectly, I should think, but then the Constitution, I bitterly would say, does not help us at all in our endeavors to grow as a young nation. Economically, we have a labor force of 4,228. And, well, 228 plus me, that would be 229. But that, of all that, those are all qualified people. We have university students right now. They've got bachelors in law, medicine. Well, medicine is okay, but economics in most of the major, degrees. But they are walking the streets of Harare, walking the streets of Bulawayo and other places. And you'll wonder why I came here, huh? It's because you have a degree, but there is no job for you. We have a 45% unemployment rate. Compare that with the US unemployment rate, which is close to less than 3%, I should think. Yeah, I think so. And just compare that with ours. Many people become thieves, educated thieves. They become, they do anything just to make a living. So, as I said, it's at least 45%. And the currency, we have the Zim dollar, the Zimbabwean dollar. This dollar is configured in a cents. So 100 cents makes $1. So 100, small brown pieces of coin, which comparatively is something like 0.002 cents when you convert it to US dollars. So, well, religion, my love and my worship. I worship this. We have a lot of religious groups. We have the traditional, the Christian and the Muslims. We've got also some weird ones. They call themselves the Dracula era. Those ones, they're not Africans though. That's the good part. They are Europeans. They are Europeans that come to, to settle, and they have, they form their own religions, and they drink human blood. So I won't go into that one, but I'll go into the more deep-rooted religions of Zimbabwe. We have a mixture of Christian tradition or ancestral worship. That's the most commonly practiced religion in Africa, I should think, as a whole. And also in Zimbabwe, to be precise. We have close to 50% of the population does practice religion in that manner, a mixture of Christian and a tradition. What we do is, at one point, when somebody dies, we go and call our ancestors, and we start, chanting, yeah, 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 Baba, something, that kind of thing. And then we arouse the spirits, and they come, and, it's the delicate part of it. And when that happens, we respect the dead. That's when we practice the traditional religion. But on Sunday, it's obvious. We go to church, we take communion, and I do believe that's blasphemy. That's in my case, but it's deeply rooted in the African culture. In order for me to better understand it, I had to live in it. And I actually experienced 2 years of it. Gruesomely, I saw a lot of magnificent things happen. Like in one ceremony when I was actually chosen to be the director of the whole thing, so I would start playing the drum, and somebody out there who can be possessed by the spirit would actually come out to play. So I was drumming the drum there, and all of a sudden, from nowhere, we just heard a voice, and that voice was coming from a cow, a cow talking. And who would believe? I wouldn't have believed if I hadn't seen it, but a cow was talking. And that culture is actually respected because of those weird, you can say, but sacred things that happen. So if you tell a Shona person that ancestral worship is it's a fantasy, they'll probably do something harmful to you. But I would understand. It's only part of human, and I don't really believe in it, but I believe in Christ, and that's my confession right now. And now we go to the sculptures of Africa, and most importantly, Shona sculptures. This Shona sculpture represents two lovers. As I said before, the Shona people have a talking language, it's living. We do dance. When we dance from the heart. We don't just dance, just to have fun. We dance from right inside of us. We are a people of the heart. We are a people of, we like expressing ourselves from deep down. We want to feel. We want to connect. We want to feel others when we talk. That's the strength that the Shona people have, and I think it has taken them far in that, with that culture and with that upbringing. The dance itself, the dancing ritual, actually brings out the affections of the heart, and comes from deep in the hearts of the dancers. So it's weird because my dad actually met my mom because he was a good dancer. So, you'll dance there, and everybody will be like trying to dance and show their enthusiasm, and wow. Well, they say it runs in the family. I'm not a good dancer, but hey, I can try. I can really try. And the women and pride. It's so sad. It's actually the dawn of the 21st century, right? Wow. And in Zimbabwe, as in many other countries in Africa, we still consider women property of men because of one thing like dowry. We call it lobola or proora. It's something that when a man, well, our forefathers put it in such a way that the man, if he's really committed to the lady that he's courting and seeing, if he's really interested in her, you will give up anything. You will give up anything. So they put the dowry in such a way that a man takes out something of his, which is material possessions, which men are always in Africa, at least in the Shona culture, they love their possessions. But if you give it away to the lady's family, they know that you're serious about the whole issue. You're serious that you won't leave my daughter, suffering, that kind of thing. But it was later on translated as time went on into an exchange between my possession, I'm giving you money, you give me the woman. So in that case, it makes it seem, it makes the whole traditional ritual look like an economic exchange. And that's unfortunate, because up to today, women are not allowed to take possession of their men's property once the man dies or their husband dies. And the weird part is that if the woman doesn't have a son in the family and has only girls in the family, the property, both the mother and the girls, will automatically change hands and they'll be transferred into another male from the husband's family. So the husband's brother will take over the family and take everything. And once they do that, in 99.9% of the cases, the women are left with nothing. They are chased out of their houses. They are chased out of their property, their land, their small houses, small possessions. They actually are left and told to go back where they came from, which is their parents' place. And the husband's brother will take over everything. So that's the unfortunate part. And once you have a small boy and you have 3 other big sisters, the land, everything that is from the husband actually goes to the young kid, no matter how old he is. So women are not given a chance to own or to be at par with men. So I lament on that. I'm not a feminist, that's one thing, but I do believe in the idea of men, that is, in quote, men and women are created equal by God, and in God's eyes we are all to be respected, or we are all to respect each other in oneness and at the same level. And society as a whole cannot accept that, the unfortunate situation. Now we go to the mother-child relationship. Mother, a woman, the one we all, in the Shona, in the African mentality, the one we all call a property. She is the link. Well, as you will see, the first word a child speaks in Shona is mama, or amai, which means mother. And the baby will speak many other words before he can say father. Isn't that weird? But in this case, the mother and the child relationship is so strong that even up to now, I miss my mom. I mean, I'm like all the time thinking of my mom. And you'll think it's weird because I'm old, but mothers are, you can never, say to heaven with my mother, because my mom, well, she's a good cook, she's a good woman. As many of you attest, your mothers are all good. So is mine. So the mother is a go-between, between the father and the child, and if that relationship is not strong, the family will be wrecked with chaos. So the whole idea of the mother-child relationship is so that the father, who is the dominant figure, sits in this huge chair, imaginary chair, and me as a kid cannot go to my father and say, hey dad, can I get this or can I get that? Like, awesomely, it's done here. You know, you can talk to your dad, you can actually go fishing with your dad. Man, that's cool. But back home, you'll have to go through your mom, and your mom will have to talk to your dad when they are in their bedroom, because they cannot discuss anything outside with their kids around. So, you know, they can always talk about, well, you know what, George wants this, so can you make, you know, provisions for that? And if he says no, I won't hear it from him. My mom will have to come to me and say, hey son, can I take you for a second, step aside? Dad say this and that and that, are you agreeing with that? I'll say no. And it goes back. So mom is always in trouble there. So if there is no strong relationship, you know, it's more like there's chaos. But the good part about it is, in most cases, the children actually are more fond of their mothers up to an extent. Like most men, once they become boys to men, they feel like, hey, I'm not a man, so I'm the head here, so forget about the mother, you know. That's an emotional thing, and we don't want to show our emotions, but they are missing a lot, because mothers at any age are the best. So now we go on to the family. The family in the Shona culture is interwoven with a strong bond that comes from the bond between mother and child, and then that's actually cross-links with the father. But that's just a sample of the whole unit, because we believe in what we call extended family. I don't have one father, I have many fathers. I actually can go into town today, do something very, very silly. A man older than me, old enough to be my father, can stop me, talk to me, reprimand me, and I will have to accept it, because he's older than me, because he's a father figure. So right now, if I had to go out and start throwing litter in the streets, though if an old man comes to me and say pick it up, I'll have to. But if a woman comes and says pick it up, for most people, they're like, who are you to tell me? But anyway, that's the whole thing. So we have an extended family. The uncles, my uncles, all the men around the community or the compound that we live in contribute into my upbringing. So when say for an example, during the drought seasons, unfortunately, because of the drought and all these modern ideas that are influxing in Zimbabwe, you know, we are losing that culture. But way back, once somebody didn't have something to eat, we will definitely say, hey, you know, come to my place. We don't know them, we are not related to them, but we'll say, hey, you know what? You don't have something to eat today? Come to my place. Next time I don't have something to eat, you know, you might have something that you can help me with. That way, the Shona culture was brought up on that, and it's been strengthened by that. But because of the modern ideas that are coming into our heads and corrupting most of our good culture, are being eroded, and it's pretty unfortunate. But I would say, importantly, the African family, no matter where you come from Kenya, Mohammed, yeah, from Oromo, right, and from Somalia, we all have a united front. No matter what, we might have small disputes in the family amongst ourselves, but outwardly, no one I mean, no one can come against a family. My family, if I am going to get into trouble right now, say I caused a fight. I don't fight at all, but I caused a fight. And my brother is there. And I'm being beat up real good. You'll call everyone, every male from the Kwangware clan to come and fight for me. And no one can, I mean, it's just like that. We fight for each other. We don't like run away from trouble when it comes if one of us is in trouble. We stand up for each other. We try and resolve things in a diplomatic way, but sometimes it doesn't end up diplomatically. It ends up in chaos. But as the Shona culture, I think it's an unwritten rule that says you stand up for your brother no matter what. You can fight at home, say you don't love your brother at home, but in the streets, that's that. You have to help one another. And that's it about the African culture and Zimbabwe with the Shona in specific. But before I leave, or before I adjourn, I would like you to see this. This is my flag, and this flag here represents about 4 different and major things. We've got 2 green stripes. These denote the breadbasket. We are an agricultural country. We've got an agricultural economy, and you know we plow. So we are good at this. So the green is for the greenery and everything. The yellow is for the minerals. Oh my goodness. The minerals. We have all the minerals we can have. But unfortunately we cannot proudly say it's ours. But we have the minerals. We have the gold. We have the diamonds. We have actually impressive ores, chrome ore, and we actually export most of the uranium to Russia. Well, we used to, for them to build, nuclear bombs and everything. But we are not proud of it. That's one thing. But unfortunately, hey, we have all those. But the money that that comes from this is going to Britain indirectly, because that's where it's being remitted. And we have the red, which signifies the war, the first and the second Chimurenga, or the war of liberation. That's where the difficult part comes. But the black is for the black pride. It's for the black people, the ethnic people, the people that have stood for what is right in most cases, and the people that have survived the worst atrocities in human history, that is colonialism, and the people that have survived all human unthinkable adversities, that is slavery. And we have survived all that. We are proud, and we put it in the middle. It's the core, and it's our pride. And we've got this small bed here. People wonder why it's there, but I forgot to bring it because I have it at home. But the bird is from Great Zimbabwe. It was, it's believed to be a very rare bird, which used to warn the chief in the Great Zimbabwe area about enemies coming into the land. It will always fly around the Great Zimbabwe whenever there are strangers, and disappear whenever there is no strangers. So it was a unique bird, and this bird makes the difference in the Shona culture. It brings the idea of the sovereignty of God on top of us. It brings in the God of protection, I should say. And though many don't really strongly believe in Christianity, they have a sense of the God in our traditional culture. And the white triangle is for peace. And peace we have, and peace I give you. This, we have been successful in keeping our peace for 19 years now. We have had a civil war, and it ended in 1987. But it wasn't a widespread civil war, it was only in Antebellum. And why I'm proud of the peace that we have had so far is because the Ndebele and the Shona we see eye to eye, we speak, we talk, and we do things together. But in the near future, my fear is that there will be a major crisis and there will be a tribal war. And we have managed to postpone it a few years, and hopefully it will be a few decades. But until then, we still are proud of our peace that is very nominal. And that's just about it. And those two statues there signify the old man, the wise man, as usual. They never do anything, they let the women plow the land, and they go drinking and smoking. But, and they take, afterwards, they are the ones that enjoy the fruits of the labors that the women actually incur. But this signifies the chief and the man who upholds the family. But I don't believe that men uphold the family anyway. It's a combination of the two. But that's my own opinion, I should state. And this one, it's made of, I think it's serpentine or something like that. It's a stone, and as you can see, the headgear is more of a rainmaker. My grandfather was a rainmaker, and believe me or not, he never made rain. But people always say that when we go into these rituals and start singing for rain, it will come, but it never did come. And you always say rain is coming on this day. It will come a month later. So anyway, that's just the title, and I would say that's just what I have and I had for you. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you learned a little bit about it. I won't go into the Victoria Falls of the Great Zimbabwe or all other, tourist attractions, because that's for later. And I will invite you all to come to Zimbabwe. And I am working on it. I am working on getting a group of people to come with me for an educational tour to Zimbabwe. I do have a few connections in the traveling industry and tourism, and they are willing to let a couple of people a year come in to see the beauty, with the hope that they will come back, and spend their money on them. But as usual, it's economic reasons. But at least if I get a few 10 people come with me to experience the culture, to experience the awesomeness of the great Zimbabwe, Victoria Falls, then I'm sure anyone is welcome. So I'll be posting that on one of the websites, probably the Pan-African website. So look into that one. Within the coming few months, I'll be getting that together, because I'd love to have people come, and especially you, sir. You deserve it. You deserve it, and I would definitely love you to be there. And everyone else, I'm not discriminating. So That's all about Zimbabwe and the Shona people. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you for coming out. Thank George for this presentation. And once a month we'll be doing presentations. In fact, next month we're going to be doing the Auroma. Tesso and a few others of our students will be presenting some of that same kind of experience. So stay tuned.
And Brother Joe tomorrow in chapel, 11:20.
Oh, meet tomorrow in chapel, 11:20.
What's your presentation about?
My presentation is about real education.
Should be.
We will call between two things. Do you want to say much about what you want to say, but you can't because of the time. So I hope after giving briefings and through questions and answers, we got chance and opportunity. I will try to answer some of the questions if you have any. The Oromo of East Africa. I would begin with the general population side area and go to the brief history. The Horn of Africa, in general, is constituted by countries like the Sudan, Ethiopian Empire States, Djibouti, and Somalia. And the place of the Oromo of East Africa is in Ethiopian Empire State. The size of the Oromo land is about 375,000 square miles or 600,000 square kilometers, which is larger than France, Italy, Switzerland, Belgium, and the Netherlands combined, just to bring to your attention the size of the area. When we come to the population, it is the largest Cushitic linguistic group, and the third largest in Africa, and it is the single largest nationality in East Africa. Oromo of East Africa have a very long early history. The Oromo developed an indigenous democratic system similar to the Grecian Poles called Gada, in which elected officials, including the president, which the Oromo called the Bagada, and the commander of the army, the Abadula, and others, assumed public office for non-renewable of 8 years terms. Since then, the Oromo remained independent until the last decade of the 19th century, when the Abyssinians from the north, aided by modern European arms, managed to conquer them. Beginning from the last decade of the 19th century, beginning of 20th century, the Oromo of East Africa were ruled by successions of autocrats from Munich to the present existing government, all of them representing the northern ethnic group. And to understand the problem of the Oromo and how they were ruled, because most of the time, whenever you talk about Oromo, what one would question is the number of the population of the Oromo in Ethiopia, Ethiopian Empire State, is 28 to 30 million, which is about 50% of the population of the peoples in Ethiopia. And people raise one basic question. Whenever you talk to them about the Oromo people, how could that happen? How are 50% of the population in the Ethiopian Empire State, manipulated and ruled by, let's say, at the beginning, the Amara ethnic group, representing about 15 to 16%, and at present by the Tigrian ethnic group, both representing the Habesha, or the Abyssinians from the north, which at present represent about 4 to 5%. And to understand this, I think we better first understand the importance of the Horn of Africa in the history of Africa in general and the world in particular. So I will just go through briefings of the importance of the Horn, the geopolitical significance of the Horn of Africa. The Horn of Africa, due to its strategic location related to the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, the Mediterranean Sea, to the Indian Ocean, at a geocultural junction between Europe, Africa, and Asia, the Horn of Africa has always been, whether by accident or design, in somewhat historical, religious, political, and military events, since the time, the ancient time, parts of Ramana, down through the millennia, to the era of the superpowers, and even today in the post-Cold War era, the Horn remains very important in security consideration of the Middle East and the increasingly competitive global economy. The Horn controls a passage from the back of the Middle East oil, strategic material crucial for the demands of Europe and the Far East. The region is also the source of the Blue Nile, a lifeline for the Sudan and Egypt. The population of the region is significantly large to serve as a source of cheap labor for investors and consumers of industrial products. And the opening of the Suez Canal in 1868 increased the geopolitical significance of the region, and during the scramble for Africa, the major colonial masters, Great Britain, France, and Italy, unwilling to relinquish exclusive control of this strategic significance region to any power among them, decided to share than one of them should own it. Therefore, Italy colonized Eritrea in 1889 and the southern Somali in 1892. The British colonized northern Somalia in 1885, and France took Djibouti in 1884. Sudan was conquered and made the Anglo-Egyptian condominium in 1898. Once the people of the Horn were brought under the domination of the external forces, they were subjected to a cruel policy of divine rule that incited fears and hostilities among peoples of the region. Now, when understanding these surroundings, when we come to the colonial origin of the Ethiopian Empire States, there is where we understand how the Oromo, 28 to 30 present Oromo peoples were colonized. The modern Ethiopian Empire State was created by the conquest of Menelik II of Shona, representing what we see the Amara region, and on the north, that's what we properly call the Abyssinian Empire States before the colonization. Menelik was the only successful black African partner in the scramble for Africa. As I've already indicated, the other areas are already under the colony of the three colonial powers of the time. So designed by the European powers in Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885. The three major colonial powers completed to use Menelik as a client to widen their spheres into the richer and historically impenetrable prize of the hinterland of Northwest Africa. Menelik, aware of the inter-imperial rivalry, feigned special friendship with each one of them to acquire such massive modern European weaponry that by the mid-1880s he had transformed his army into one of the largest and the strongest in the reign, so much so that in 1889 he felt confident enough for his own booty of the Horn, far beyond his Amara enclave, to include the Oromo, Somali, Afar, Sidama, Omotic, Nilotic, and the southern areas spreading well beyond the confines of modern Ethiopia. So the formation of a solid Ethiopian former state, anyhow, as you see the map, the Abyssinian states which constitute the Amhara and Tigray, after he collaborated, got a proper armament support from the three colonial powers, he was in a position to expand his territories southward, southeast, and southwestern, and that was the time when Oromia fall under the colonial yoke. According to some statistics, by the time he started his move southward, controlled over 100,000 armaments, and the peoples of the south, including Oromia, had nothing at all. Without an exaggeration, they resisted Milik with spears and bows, having no gun at all. There is where we practically answer the question, how was 28 to 30 million people was dominated by either 15 to 16 or 4 to 5 persons. Therefore, hereafter, at no time in history did Ethiopia control all these areas except in the last 100 years. At no time before the conquest of Milik was the present day Ethiopia a single country, whether we accept it or not. Even though the fabricated and mystery of the history of the Abyssinian Empire would take us to 3,000 years back. What existed were independent polities, kingdoms in Abyssinia to the north, and various confederacies in Oromia and others under the Gada system, the southern kingdoms of Walaita, Kaficho, and Yem, other southern peoples in general. The official Ethiopian history that echoed some less critical scholars present Milik's era as the unification of Ethiopia is a fabrication, pure and simple, as in the rest of colonial Africa. The Oromo and other southern peoples were subjugated, their peace, their cultural identities, and human dignities deprived. The conquest of the south took Milik 40 years, as we see, these areas, where he did not control all of them at one time, in a single year, but about 40 years. In the case of the Oromo, 5 anti-Gada grades mounted unrelenting resistance. The critical role played by the European armament and technical assistance in the subjugation of the Oromo was recorded by Earl Layton, which I just quote in short here, a British diplomat who was then in Ethiopia, who wrote in his book, The Stolen Deserts, affirms, he says, without massive European help, the Gala, this is a pejorative term or name given to the Oromo by the Amhara, would not have been conquered at all. Milik seems to have operated with French technicians, French map makers, French advice on the management of the standing army, and more French advice as to holding a captured province with permanent garrisons of conscripted colonial troops. The French also armed his troops with firearms and did much else to organize his campaigns. The Gala, the Oromo, he says, I quote him, were thus conquered by Abyssinians for the first time in recorded history. Another writer, who was also in Ethiopian Empire, a British captain, M.S. Welby, who wrote a book in 1901, about 90 years ago. In his book, Twixt Sirdar and Milik, which was published in London, Harper and Brothers Publishers, he says, in fact, the lack of armament was the major cause for the defeat of the Oromo by and large. And then he says, it is certain where the Arusi, one of the Oromo major tribes, armed with rifles, they would be hard nut for Milik to crack. They wouldn't have been easily defeated if they were armed. took Milik about 1 full year and 5 times leading himself, his forces, to occupy that particular area we call Arsi, which is the heartland of Oromia. Another a foreigner who was also in Ethiopia, at this time when colonization was taking place, also witnessed the same thing. In his book and reporting, in fact, there were other European travelers who more or less witnessed the same thing. But just to take one of them, he was a Russian officer. His name was Lieutenant Alexander Bultovich, who was a guest of Emperor Menelik and who visited most of the conquered areas following one of Menelik's officials named Raswell the Gorgas and his army of 30,000 men on their expedition towards western Oromia and to a region called Ilo Babora. And they lived in Toto, the center. And in his report, he says, 10 to 12 years ago, that area before the conquest, 10 to 12 years ago, this country was completely settled, and of course there wasn't a piece of good land left uncultivated. But cattle disease led to famine, and the destruction of the population during the subjugation and the conquest of Menelik left the regions as half depopulated. Riding through every minute you come across, that was what he observed. This is an eyewitness account. Lines of cactus tree among the overgrowth indicating former property boundaries of the former fence of farmstead. Now the territory all around is completely overgrown with bushes. Rarely you can come upon Oromo or Ganda settlement. And one very important, interesting note he left behind is the resistance, the hatred and the bias that he met from the population. On November 16, he says, we spent the night at the home of a Ghana, the pejorative term of the time. The family consisted of the host, the father of whom was killed by Abyssinian during the subjugation, his mother and 2 wives. The host himself apparently was reconciled with his fate, but his mother looked on Abyssinians escorting the person with fear and anger and sat by the fire all night long with their bias, hatred. That was the situation to reflect how Oromia was occupied and conquered. Well, thereafter, during the reign of Emperor Haile Selassie, and later also during the time of the Derg, or the military government, the successive autocratic rulers had tried to subjugate, to conquer the mind and resources of Oromia. Fortunate for the Oromo, the people of Oromia had never stopped the resistance. The resistance continued up to today, and it will continue tomorrow. And what we see here in front of us is that resistance. And in general, the history of the Oromo people is not known. It's only this time, after a few Oromo left the country and tried to introduce Oromia and the Oromo people to the world. Because of the Abyssinian Empire State formation, the history of the Oromo people, as well as other southern peoples, is not known. No mass media, no history text as such, which discuss about the people of the Oromia, as well as southern Ethiopian Empire State. In brief, short, this is what I would like to just bring to your attention. I hope I did not take much of the time.
Classes and in your other classes, And they're available up here. I'll just pass a couple of them around so you can just see what they are.
Are you selling it?
Yes. And 50% of all of this goes to the refugees that, but I went as a missionary in and I'll date myself on this too, 1964, and I worked in western Walega in a town called Matu, which is right about there. Gori was about 10 miles away from Matu. And I ran a hospital, helped run a hospital and operating room, and was teaching some of the dressers or the EMTs and the paramedics in Addis Ababa. At that time, we didn't really know it as Finfini very much. And we came back here in 1972. We were married in 1970, and we came back here to America in 1972. And had a daughter in 1977. And it was at that time that I realized that I needed to be an Oromo by marriage in order for my daughter to know her bilateral culture. We have found over the history of this time that young people have problems when they do not understand their background and who they are, where they came from, and particularly in a bicultural marriage. So we were living in my culture, so everything that was directed in our house was pretty much directed towards the Oromo culture, understanding, realizing history. The only thing we didn't succeed in is language. And the reason we didn't succeed in language is because since 1972, we have resettled about 89 refugees who have come through our house and have become productive citizens, mostly in Minnesota. And we found that every time it was time for us to have some language in Auromitha, everybody needed to know English, like yesterday, because they're in school, they're in ESL languages, they're going into college, and they said, we have to talk English, we have to talk English. So my daughter Kulani and I, we suffered. We still don't know Auromitha, and we still sort of wander around not knowing the language. Now as adults, we're going to try one more time because we haven't resettled any of the refugees in our home anymore. So when I introduce myself, I'm an Oromo by marriage. Now I can talk about we because I have become, I think, pretty accultured. In fact, there are some people who say, oh, she's tough, she's even more Oromo than I am. Or she tells me what I should or shouldn't do and knows the culture. Well, there are many things that I'm amazed that I don't know that come up every now and then. I went back in 1981 to bring my mother-in-law out. Tisisa could not go back because of the dirt. Bizuwork told you about the Haile Mengistu Miriam. It was difficult at that time to get people, but Grandma came out, so we brought Grandma out. She stayed with us. Grandma went home. Grandma wanted to come out again, so we brought her out one more time, and then after 3 years she decided it was just too hard for somebody older to acclimate themselves into our society here, so she went back home and lives in a village called Lalokili, which, tell me if I'm right, should be in here somewhere. Is that right, Todd?
Just go behind her.
This way?
Yeah.
Down in there. Anyhow, we went back in 1993, took our daughter, she was 16 years old, lived in the village, no electricity, no running water. She had long hair and was used to sometimes two showers a day and get the hair all done every day, you know, and all this sort of stuff. 2 weeks later, she came out understanding that it isn't always possible to have all this. She really grew as a person when she realized just what people in some of these villages, how they lived happy, singing, dancing, and life was a little different in her eyes after we brought her back out. When we went to Oromia, to Walega, to the west, we had no problems that time. It was right after the fall of the Derg, or the Mengistu Haile Mariam government. A new government was coming in place. We assumed that the Oromo would have a place in that government, but it was apparent after a couple of years that that was not to be. And actually now we hear from people who have lived in all three dynasties that this is by far the worst. That no one ever dreamed that it could be worse than the 17 years under the communists. under the 50, 60, 70 years of Haile Selassie, who also was a master politician at putting people on one side and working them against people on the other side and staying in power because he would divide and rule and put rumors out, and nobody trusted anybody, but still he maintained, he got some schools in, he let the missionaries come in, he let them do schools, he put them in particular areas, but never, there was discrimination against the Oromo language-wise. Probably the biggest single thing was language, but he did let them go to school, sort of, up to 8th grade, not very many in high school. And they all had to learn Amharic, which is the official language at that time, and they had to master it in order for them to move on. So it was the most difficult thing for them to do because their mother tongue, they prayed in Oromo, in Oromifa, they prayed, they played, their mother and dad talked in Oromifa, they had to go to school, use a new language. And when the ministers and the preachers taught, the missionaries were preaching, there would be a triple translation. Talk in English, went to Amharic, and then it was translated to Oromifa, all in a Sunday morning, by law, by the decree of Haile Selassie. And as a result, we had people who didn't write our history, didn't draw our maps. We had a lot of oral history, but we didn't have a lot of books. In fact, they're just beginning to come out now in Oromifa or in Kube. We, and I say we, I'm talking about the Oromo, are still struggling. We have tough times. There's no law. The rule of law has been lost, and the rule of fairness. Even Haile Selassie had a certain rule of law and fairness within the court system. Even the Derg, they say, had a certain law and rule of law. That seems to have been lost now, and we have so many of our people who are in prison who have been lost, who are tortured. Amnesty International, I don't know if any of you belong or got any of the urgent actions. There are many coming out about people. Some of the people who are our friends, and we don't call them blood relatives, but know each other so well for so many years. And they are in prison. Some of them disappeared in the last 6 weeks. We've had a couple of them that have disappeared. But there are some things that are absolutely unique to the Oromo. And one of them, to me, is the Oda Tree. When I think of, if I were to name one symbol that would, to me, identify Oromo, and what this stands for, it's the Oda Tree. And the Oda Tree is a sycamore tree, and it's huge. And this is one of them that's in Oromia. And many of them, of course, over the years have been cut down. But there are some standing, and they're hallowed pieces of ground. And the Oda Tree's significance is that within the culture of Oromo, they have their own way of dealing with conflict resolution. And conflict resolution is you bring the Jarsis and the Jartis, which are the older elders, together under the tree, and marital problems, cattle stealing problems, money problems, chicken problems, government problems, and political problems can always be taken care of under the Oda Tree. And it is so important because when you look up in an Oda Tree, it's huge. The shade goes forever, and it's cool in the hotness of the desert or in the hotness by a river. And you walk under this respite, and it's quiet, and it's the place where conflict is resolved. The other thing about the tree is that in your books and in the history books, you'll hear people write and say, oh, there are many pagan, animistic pagan people of Ethiopia. The north were the Christians, and then the rest were divided into some pagan, some animistic, some Muslim, and some Christian. But as Tasisa and I have gone back and talked to the elders, to the oldest people we can find, about what their grandpas and grandmas said about this, there is a word, waka, which is God. And it has been in the Oromo language as far back as anybody has ever been able to go. As where there was an Auroma, there was a luck, which means there has always been a supreme being. What the missionaries saw, and what some of the other people saw, is that they would bring food and salt and drink under the tree. But what they were doing is the thing that they saw that was the tallest thing there was around them obviously had to be the closest to the Supreme Being. So they were offering sacrifices through the tree to the god. In my mind, we have never been animistic or pagan. And they're proving this more and more now as they're going back over people who wrote history of the East Africans and of that area, that this is true. Because in my heart, we have people, the Oromo people, and I'm generalizing now, I'm going to stereotype, soft-spoken, a lot to get them angry, listening, capable of listening, capable of discerning, of decision-making. And this, in the eyes of the aggressors, or the very strong people who were running around, thought that they were weak. No problem, we'll just bowl them over and we'll just keep them underfed, undereducated, and we won't have to worry about them during the 200 years, the years even before Menelik, and then the 100 years of Menelik. Now, on the way to the tree, there is a kind of a uniform that a good-looking, tall Oromo man would wear for a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon to go to his meeting under the Oda Tree. Now, when he goes, most generally, there is always some form of khaki or some form of abajedi, which is unbleached muslin, that color of cloth for centuries back. Imru, what do you got a khaki? I need a khaki Oromo, khaki wearing Oromo. Who's got a khaki on? Come on. Yeah, that's khaki. Now, this is called a gabi, the most beautiful piece of cloth that ever was invented and ever was woven by our wonderful Oromo weavers. And what we do is this man, when he goes to his, go ahead and put it on, flip it over. So you gotta open it all the way, don't you? Do you know how? Some of them have been out a long time, so they may have forgotten how to put the gabi on. Anyway. Help them, guys. There you go. All right. All right, there you go. All right, now, on his house, he takes his hat,
Make it this way.
and he takes his fly swisher. Put your other one,
I can't see.
can't see? And he hangs this on his belt because he may be going where there is nothing to sit on. So he takes his own piece of wood that hangs on his belt. Here, I'll hold that for you. Just, can you get it on? Okay. And every man has an Oromo stick. And there he would go, the best dressed man, off to his meeting at the Oda Tree on a Saturday afternoon. And then he would come over here and he would take, afterwards he'd come and he'd get his lady friends in the house, if you girls would get up. And they would go probably be invited out to somebody's place for dinner. So we have, if you come through here, one would be, we'll let one be a daughter and one be a mama. And these are called Wandabos, and they are similar to the other ethnic groups within East Africa. The difference in this one particularly is that she didn't see this, but this border only goes in the back, and that is the sign of an Oromo woman's dress. And this goes in the back with the border not going all the way around the front, except on fancy days they would put on these with the borders and the bigger borders and the higher borders. And then the belt is tied around like this on the Oromo dresses. And when they use it for fancy festival days, then these shawls are draped, and they're very fancy ways to drape the shawl, and mine always falls off, so I hardly ever wear them anymore because I move around too much and they'll all come tumbling down. And I never looked well dressed when I wore the gowns because I could never keep these robes and these scarves up. But this is pretty typical of what you would see, not so much maybe in the city, although in the city too, but in the villages and in the smaller cities and in Walega and Harar, the eastern part is just a little bit different, but the gabi is forever, the hat is forever, and the stick is for sure, because everybody uses that. And they use that for protection as well as for status. And those who have the nicest looking sticks have the smoothest and are the oldest. Thanks, guys. Then there's a couple of other things. The town of Jima at one time was completely forested over, they tell me. And they came up with a way to make what we call the Jima Stool. And what the Jima Stool is they take a section of tree, and it's usually the lower part of the trees. And it's a hard wood, and I do not know the name of it. I'm not a very good biologist or zoologist. So I'm not exactly sure what they are, but they would take the bottom 2 feet or 18 inches. And on the very fancy ones, the trees, years ago used to be this big around at the bottom. So we have Jima stools that are 18 inches in diameter. One piece of wood, and it's carved. It's carved out singly so that there is no joining of any of this. Now this was made for us in, where? Nakim. We went through a town on the way out to see Grandma, and we said we wanted some of these, and we came back 3 days later, is that right? And this man had made 3 of these for us, so he said he carved all day and night, because it was difficult to find these. And as the wood is becoming less and less, and as the forests are being forested, and that is another thing which the government at the present time is doing. They do not have trees in the upper 2 areas, in the Tigray area and in the Amhara area, and you can see truckloads of logs being logged up there, so that our trees are never left to grow big. And as the trees get smaller and are cut, the smaller the Jima stools get. And they soon think that it will be non-existent and will be very difficult to keep up some of these cultural furnitures which we have used for many, many years. Now, food is always a big commodity, as you can see. I will think of, yes?
Why does the stool have to be made of the bottom 18 inches of the tree? Do you know
Because
that?
the rest of the tree goes narrower. And you want the widest part. You know, if you've got a 20-foot tree, the first 2 feet will probably be the same diameter. Okay? As you get up, it'll go cone shape, and it's very difficult then because you need to have your legs at the same diameter as you do at the top. And that's why you don't get very many of these out of a tree. And they have never been able to use those on a lathe. You know, I said, well, why not mechanize this a little bit? But they break when they try to do them on a lathe. I'm sure that there's ways that this would have to be done with a simple wood knife carving. And we had talked about sanding this and making it until it's really smooth and looks very pretty and sanding it. And then we decided, no, that this was some man's work for me, and he made these for me, that we would leave them the way that he had done them for us to the best of his ability within the shortest length of time. Okay, some of you, all of the Oromos, and some of the rest of you have had some food or have heard about our food, which is called ito and budena. Budena is the bread, which is made out of teff, budena, B-U-D-D-E-N-N-A, is that right? Ito is I-T-T-O. Budena is made out of teff, T-E-F, or bakolo, which is corn. And do they make it out of wheat? They don't make, no, Budena doesn't make. Okay, and they're made, it's a flat pancake, much like a crepe, except that it doesn't flop over and you have eyes. The little holes that you see in the budena are eyes. And one of the ways it's judged whether a woman is ready to have a husband is how good her budena is and how many eyes. I failed every test I ever had. I still haven't even been. If that had been the criteria, I would be an old man. And when they make the budena, it's made on a pottery mitad or a pottery plate. Ele. Ooh, I just did something very bad. I used another word for this other than the Auroma word. On an ele, that's about this size, and they put it in like this, and it's sitting on a fire with 3 stones, very, very hot, made with eucalyptus leaves and eucalyptus trees. One of the things about eucalyptus, when it was introduced in that area, is that it was a life-saving tree. The roots go as deep as the trunk goes high. In fact, one of the things my husband used when he gave me my locket that's got a eucalyptus tree on it is, my love for you is as deep as the roots of this eucalyptus tree. Now, isn't that nice?
He must have run.
The rest of you talk to me later. Anyway, so it's made of goat, wonderful. Sheep, really good. Beef, not as good. Chicken, wonderful. Feast food is made out of chicken. And it's made with a hot sauce of onions and over there we don't use tomatoes. Back here we use tomatoes, but onions and about 17 spices. And a form of butter that is a sour cream butter. And none of you are old enough to know that before World War I, we didn't have refrigerators in America. And one of the things that we ate was sour cream butter. And so when I got over there, I can remember as a child thinking, my dad ate sour cream butter because we didn't have refrigerators then. And it was churned, and it just had a sort of a bite to it. The same thing is what they do, and we suspect that that has come about because they didn't have any way of refrigerating it, so they let it sour, and then they made butter, and the aroma is wonderful. And when you first go to Auroma, you think, I can't stand the smell. It's really overpowering. You go into houses, you go into the restaurants, you go into the hospital's kitchen, and you can smell this. And then you gradually learn to eat this, and this hot, spicy food. And with this very bland bread, budena, you dip the bread into the hot sauce, and it makes me salivate just thinking about it. It's so good. But one of the things I brought along is I want you to smell the hot pepper that goes into this. For those of you who don't, here, pass it around. It's very, very hot pepper, and it's a different strand than the one they use in Mexico. And it doesn't have the bitter bite of the Mexican or the Mexican chili peppers as this very, very does. And also, the Auromas have learned how to mellow it out with salt and all the other spices so that it's a very, very gourmet type of spice that's used in any hot sauce. And in our home, we have it sitting on the table and they sprinkle it on because when I have guests and my daughter isn't like it as much as we do, we just add it, or when she's not home, we just make our own. Yes, so. But I never make budena. My budena is too bad. And then, of course, one of the other things that all of Auroma is known for, because we have a province that's called Kaffa, K-A-F-F-E-E. And within Kaffa province, they call it the father of coffee. Coffee plants are all over in Auroma, not so much in the east, but in western and southern. It is the most beautiful, shiny leaf plant. 8 years ago, I gave my husband for his birthday 4 coffee plants. And We almost killed a couple of them when we went to Auroma and they froze because they didn't water them and put them too close to the windows and so forth and so on. But now we have 3 of them that are about this tall. And last year, we had to move out to our lake home because we'd sold our house and didn't have a townhouse, so we had to go out to our lake home. Hauled all these plants, about 20 of them, into this little small greater room. So all these plants came with us, and we had 1 coffee plant in 1 bedroom, far away. We had 1 coffee plant over by the door, which was far away, and right in front of our picture window, we put 2 coffee plants that were intermeshed with their leaves, in and out and around and so on and so forth. These are 8 years old now. Lo and behold, a couple of months later, we had white flowers. A couple of months after that, we had coffee beans. Last Saturday night, we had a party because we had a coffee picking celebration. The only 3 coffee beans in all of North America. I called every place I could think of, university. Here, look. The university. Try not to touch them. They tell me the oil of your hands. Yep. Anyway, now, when you talk about how plants did not have them, and in fact we almost lost one of them isolated. Let me see. I think I have talked long enough. I'm sorry, Mr. Work, I took a little bit longer than you. No. Mizzou and I would be glad to answer questions, about anything. We are a wonderful people. We have a rich heritage. We will someday be recognized. I have one more thing to say. There are 3 groups of people, or 4 groups of people. The East Timor were never recognized. The Kurdish people were never recognized. The Palestinians, and it's going to be a struggle. But with these young men here and you young Oromos here, I just know that we will be recognized and we will be in the United Nations someday, I promise. I forgot one thing. This little SBO up here stands for our Oromo radio. Nobody will ever let, in East Africa, they won't let the radio be done in Auromifa. And we have to get from outside the country, we have a radio that beams back to the people. And we get letters from hundreds of them that here we do women's issues, we do news, we do health issues. One of the ways that we've decided to do AIDS prevention is through the radio, and everybody has access to a radio. And so this calendar is sold with all of the proceeds from the entire, Digitized, and I donate these, and this goes entirely to the Zimbabwe radio, which is, as far as we're concerned, for identification, is probably as important as any other one thing we can do other than meetings like this.
I'm really interested in if the Oromo people didn't have a lot of weapons, was there a pacifist nature to or was there a sense of nonviolence? It sounded like working out things under the tree, and it sounds like maybe the culture had something more than just a reason why there are no weapons, and I'm interested.
Well, there are a lot of people, and you can add to this, there are a lot of people who had labeled the Oromo pastoralists, keeper of the cattle, but also their conflict resolution and their sense of democracy. And you have one of the earliest civilized democracies under the Gada system, taught them from as a child on that there are other ways to take care of conflict than there are to do fighting. They were known as warriors after Menelik insisted that he was going to conquer them. Then when people are pushed into a corner, and that's another thing, when you argue with a Oromo, my husband is very quiet, very soft-spoken, blah, blah, I'll tell you when he really gets upset about it. And that's like a dog being pushed into a corner, doesn't snap until that.
Explain was the northern Abyssinian kingdom, the Abyssinian state proper, had contacts with Europe a long time ago, before the people of Oromia had accessibility and introduced themselves to the Europe foreigners. And there is record that the Abyssinians had got their first armament from Europe about 1870, mid-1870s. And due to the lack of accessibility, the Oromo people had no any access to outside, and they were not really introduced to this European new armament of the time. Or else when it comes to fighting and defending their territory, defending their property, the Oromo in record really, as some travelers account shows a well-known fierce fighter. And you know, one of the writers, actually not the writers, but he traveled with Menelik when Menelik was fighting the people of Arsi, constituted the heart of Oromia, as I've said. And he says their swift horse, when the people ran to the guns, were as fast as the bullets that were running out of the barrels of guns of Menelik. It might seem exaggeration, but they were fierce fighters. So it's not really a question of passivity. Natural ways come to defending their right, defending their territory, defending their property, is lack of accessibility.
So it wasn't,
Go ahead.
thank you. No, I'm just thinking maybe there was a way of conflict resolution that was something that our culture could learn from.
Yeah, actually that's
before,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
before you would resolve.
Yeah, actually they resort to that,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to interclan conflict and the like. Yeah, but when it comes to, you know, somebody coming to take
Right.
your land, your property, you don't as such resort to conflict resolution, because that will not solve it. In such circumstances, the lack of accessibility to European armament had its own disadvantage in the resistance.
Interesting in the very, very significant events that have been taken care of by this conflict resolution, and when it was done, it was stamped by the judge that this is the way this is to be now. So there are ways, and the conflict resolution departments, and I think there's one in Colombia, are recognizing that these historic ones, well, not historic, they're being used still over there, are very good for this. I just have one more thing. One of the reasons, excuse me.
Complementary idea regarding what has already been said. First of all, I'm very much indebted to the Augsburg College and participating students to give us this opportunity of this event, because we almost what we are running short of in our struggle is publicizing ourselves. In our struggle of 100 years, we are really not exposed to the world community, but for the world community is very much misinformed about the Oromos because of the entry of Ethiopians and as well Ethiopian historiographers. So therefore the point I want to make is, why not we rectify history? One, Ethiopia is mythology in history. It is illusion in history. But the current Ethiopians have read the history of the Horn of Africa and put the name for themselves. Originally, the name Ethiopia never belongs to Amara and Tigray. The name Ethiopia applies not only to Amara Tigrayans, but all to all people belonging to the Horn of Africa. The reality here is that the current Amara Tigrayans are not Ethiopians, but they are Abyssinians. Therefore, at this point in time, we have to make a pledge to call the Ethiopians by their proper name, Abyssinians. The other thing I want to make is, the whole thing we have had so far from the Horn of Africa is really fiction, the fiction of history. The Ethiopian historians and the Ethiopian historiographers, for example, like Christopher Kalafam, Richard Pankhurst, has even cheated the world in writing indoctrinations, false ideas regarding the Abyssinians only by ignoring almost 80 nations and nationalities belonging to the Horn of Africa, including Oromos. For your really current information, the reference I am trying to give you regarding the historical documents rating of the Horn of Africa is the current book published by Sahibs and Bani Halicom, the Unification of Ethiopia. Regardless of this, all the heap of hypocrisies are really fallacious. Therefore, let us make a pledge at this millennium, at the dawn of the 21st century, to rewrite the history of the Horn of Africa, to be informed properly, and as well, let the world also take the responsibility of pleading its right to hear something genuine from the Horn of Africa, not from us. Also, the responsibility lies also to all people. Why are you informing? Misinforming? You guys from Africa, even from Europe, from the United States, they have really they were misdirected, they are misinformed. Therefore, the world people should plead its right of hearing something genuine from the Abyssinian.
That's why something like this is so important at a university level, and then go on down and go to the high schools now, because there are a lot of Auroma students there that have asked us to come and to help them explain. So we're just in Oromia, just let it be, and we'll be up here and you'll be down there. But we're known as the breadbasket of the world. We have the greenest, we have the vegetables, we have the water, we have the trees, and we have the gold. And this gold is from Malega, and it is used culturally as a gift. The best gift that you can, whenever I've left a place, they have always given me a bar of raw gold. And that's what this is. And it is also an endearment between young men and young women in place of the diamond.
And work with the neighborhood and this community, and how pleased I am that you all are here and that you are part of our neighborhood, and that it is right, you know, and good that you're here at Augsburg College and that we learn more about your community and what's going on here. So I thank all of you for coming today, and thank the Pan-African Student Group for bringing you all here. And you're welcome here at Augsburg College.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thanks.
Thought you were different.